Welcome, fellow seekers of arcane knowledge and wisdom. I am Archidos. Today we delve into a cornerstone of esoteric wisdom. The Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall. This monumental work is more than just a book. It's a compendium that serves to shine light upon the occulted knowledge of our world, which underpins the collective psyche of humanity today. In this tome, Hall takes us on a journey through time and consciousness. He uncovers the secret doctrines and philosophies that have shaped human thought across civilizations. From the ancient mysteries of Egypt and Greece to the symbolic language of Freemasonry and Rosicrucianism, Hall presents a panoramic view of the vast and often hidden knowledge of our world. Hall explores subjects such as symbology and alchemy, the arcane wisdom of the Kabbalah, and the mystical insights of Eastern philosophy, providing a unified view of what might be called the perennial philosophy. As a guide through this labyrinth of hidden knowledge, Hall doesn't just inform, he invites us to question, to ponder, and to see the interconnectedness of all esoteric teachings and all things. His work illuminates the path for those seeking to understand the deeper truths of the universe, consciousness, and the ultimate nature of reality. In our journey today, we will be focusing on the final conclusion of this profound book. It's a section that encapsulates the essence of Hall's teachings and offers a glimpse into the profound depths of human knowledge and potential. So too, it presents the essence of Hall's own personal philosophy and offers a kind of perspective on our own world, one which has become increasingly rare in this global age of materialism. This perspective has not waned in relevance since his time. He eloquently presents a critique of the decadent and perilous conditions of the early 20th century, and his warnings and remedies appear more crucial now than ever before. So, let us embark on this journey of discovery and enlightenment together. Please note that this video will be part one of a two-part production. Without any further delay, let us begin. Philip, king of Macedon, ambitious to obtain the teacher who would be most capable of imparting the higher branches of learning to his 14-year-old son, Alexander, and wishing the prince to have for his mentor the most famous and learned of the great philosophers, decided to communicate with Aristotle. He dispatched the following letter to the Greek sage. Philip to Aristotle, health. Know that I have a son. I render the gods many thanks, not so much for his birth, as that he was born in your time. For I hope that being educated and instructed by you, he will become worthy of us both, and the kingdom which he shall inherit. Accepting Philip's invitation, Aristotle journeyed to Macedon in the 4th year of the 108th Olympiad, and remained for 8 years as the tutor of Alexander. The young prince's affection for his instructor became as great as that which he had felt for his father. He said that his father had given him being, but that Aristotle had given him well-being. The basic principles of the ancient wisdom were imparted to Alexander the Great by Aristotle, and at the philosopher's feet, the Macedonian youth came to realize the transcendency of Greek learning as it was personified in Plato's immortal disciple. Elevated by his illumined teacher to the threshold of philosophic sphere, he beheld the world of sages, the world that fate and the limitations of his own soul decreed he should not conquer. Aristotle in his leisure hours edited and annotated the Iliad of Homer and presented the finished volume to Alexander. This book the young conqueror so highly prized that he carried it with him on all his campaigns. At the time of his triumph over Darius, discovering among the spoils a magnificent gem-studded casket of unguents, he dumped its contents upon the ground, declaring that at last he had found a case worthy of Aristotle's edition of the Iliad. While on his Asiatic campaign, Alexander learned that Aristotle had published one of his most prized discourses, an occurrence which deeply grieved the young king. So, to Aristotle, conqueror of the unknown, Alexander, conqueror of the known, sent this reproachful and pathetic admission of the insufficiency of worldly pomp and power. Alexander to Aristotle, health. You were wrong in publishing those branches of science hitherto not to be acquired except from oral instruction. In what shall I excel others if the more profound knowledge I gained from you be communicated to all? For my part, I had rather surpass the majority of mankind in the sublimer branches of learning than in extent of power and dominion. Farewell. The recipient of this amazing letter caused no ripple in the placid life of Aristotle, who replied that although the discourse had been communicated to the multitudes, none who had not heard him deliver the lecture, who lacked spiritual comprehension, could understand its true import. A few short years and Alexander the Great went the way of all flesh, and with his body crumbled the structure of empire erected upon his personality. 1 year later, Aristotle also passed into that greater world concerning whose mysteries he had so often discoursed with his disciples in the Lyceum. But as Aristotle excelled Alexander in life, so he excelled him in death. Although his body molded in an obscure tomb, the great philosopher continued to live in his intellectual achievements. Age after age paid him grateful tribute. Generation after generation pondered over his theorems, until by the sheer transcendency of his rational faculties, Aristotle, the master of those who know, as Dante has called him, became the actual conqueror of the very world which Alexander had sought to subdue with the sword. Thus it is demonstrated that to capture a man, it is not sufficient to enslave his body. It is necessary to enlist his reason, for to free a man it is not enough to strike the shackles from his limbs. His mind must be liberated from bondage to his own ignorance. Physical conquest must ever fail, for generating hatred and dissension, it spurs the mind to an avenging of an outraged body. But all men are bound, whether willingly or unwillingly, to obey that intellect in which they recognize qualities and virtues superior to their own. That the philosophic culture of ancient Greece, Egypt, and India excelled that of the modern world must be admitted by all, even by the most confirmed of the modernists. The golden era of Greek aesthetics, intellectualism, and ethics has never since been equaled. The true philosopher belongs to the most noble order of men, the nation or race which is blessed by possession of such illumined thinkers is fortunate indeed, and its name shall be remembered for their sake. In the famous Pythagorean school at Crotona, philosophy was regarded as indispensable to the life of a man. He who did not comprehend the dignity of the reasoning power could not properly be said to live. Therefore, when through innate perverseness a member either voluntarily withdrew or was forcibly ejected from the philosophic fraternity, a headstone was set up for him in the community graveyard. For he who had forsaken intellectual and ethical pursuits to re-enter the material sphere with its illusions of sense and false ambition was regarded as one dead to the sphere of reality. The life represented by the thraldom of the senses, the Pythagoreans conceived to be spiritual death, while they regarded the death to the sense world as spiritual life. Philosophy bestows life, and that it reveals the dignity and purpose of living. Materiality bestows death, and that it benumbs or clouds those faculties of the human soul which should be responsible to the enlivening impulses of creative thought and ennobling virtue. How inferior to these standards of remote days are the laws by which men live in the 20th century. Today, man, a sublime creature with infinite capacity for self-improvement, in an effort to be true to false standards, turns from his birthright of understanding without realizing the consequences and plunges into the maelstrom of material illusion. The precious span of his earthly years he devotes to the pathetically futile effort to establish himself as an enduring power in a realm of unenduring things. Gradually, the memory of his life as a spiritual being vanishes from his objective mind, and he focuses all of his partly awakened faculties upon the seething beehive of industry, which he has come to consider the sole actuality. From the lofty heights of his selfhood, he slowly sinks into the gloomy depths of ephemerality. He falls to the level of the beast, and in brutish fashion mumbles the problems arising from his all too insufficient knowledge of the divine plan. Here in the lurid turmoil of a great industrial, political, and commercial inferno, men writhe in self-inflicted agony, and reaching out into the swirling mists, strive to clutch and hold the grotesque phantoms of success and power. Ignorant of the cause of life, ignorant of the purpose of life, ignorant of what lies beyond the mystery of death, yet possessing within himself the answer to it all, man is willing to sacrifice the beautiful, the true, and the good within and without upon the blood-stained altar of worldly ambition. The world of philosophy, that beautiful garden of thought wherein the sages dwell in the bond of fraternity, fades from view. In its place rises an empire of stone, steel, smoke, and hate, a world in which millions of creatures potentially human scurry to and fro in a desperate effort to exist and at the same time maintain the vast institution which they have erected and which, like some mighty juggernaut, is rumbling inevitably towards an unknown end. In this physical empire, which man erects in the vain belief that he can outshine the kingdom of the celestials, everything is changed to stone. Fascinated by the glitter of gain, man gazes at the Medusa-like face of greed and stands petrified. In this commercial age, science is concerned solely with the classification of physical knowledge and investigation of the temporal and illusionary parts of nature. Its so-called practical discoveries bind man but more tightly with the bonds of physical limitation. Religion, too, has become materialistic. The beauty and dignity of faith is measured by huge piles of masonry, by tracts of real estate, or by the balance sheet. Philosophy which connects heaven and earth like a mighty ladder, up the rungs of which the illumined of all ages have climbed into the living presence of reality. Even philosophy has become a prosaic and heterogeneous mass of conflicting notions. Its beauty, its dignity, its transcendency are no more. Like other branches of human thought, it has been made materialistic, practical, and its activities so directionalized that they may also contribute their part to the erection of this modern world of stone and steel. In the ranks of the so-called learned, there is a rising up of a new order of thinkers, which may be best termed the school of the worldly wise men. After arriving at the astounding conclusion that they are the intellectual salt of the earth, these gentlemen of letters have appointed themselves the final judges of all knowledge, both human and divine. This group affirms that all mystics must have been epileptic and most of the saints neurotic. It declares God to be a fabrication of primitive superstition, the universe to be intended for no particular purpose, immortality to be a figment of the imagination, and an outstanding individuality to be but a fortuitous combination of selves. Pythagoras is asserted to have suffered from a being complex, Socrates a notorious inebriate. St. Paul was subject to fits, Paracelsus was an infamous quack, the Cagliostro a mountebank, and the Saint Germain the outstanding crook of history. What do the lofty concept of the world's illumined saviors and sages have in common with these stunted, distorted products of the realism of this century? All over the world, men and women ground down by the soulless cultural systems of today are crying out for the return of the banished age of beauty and enlightenment, or something practical in the highest sense of the word. A few are beginning to realize that the so-called civilization in its present form is at a vanishing point, that coldness, heartlessness, commercialism, and material efficiency are impractical, and only that which offers opportunity for the expression of love and ideality is truly worthwhile. All the world is seeking happiness, but knows not in what direction to search. Men must learn that happiness crowns the soul's quest for understanding. Only through the realization of infinite goodness and infinite accomplishment can the peace of the inner self be assured. In spite of man's geocentrism, there is something in the human mind that is reaching out to philosophy, not to this or that philosophic code, but simply to philosophy in the broadest and fullest sense. The great philosophic institutions of the past must rise again, for these alone contain the veil which divides the world of causes from that of effects. Only the mysteries, those sacred colleges of wisdom, can reveal to struggling humanity that greater and more glorious universe, which is the true home of the spiritual being called man. Modern philosophy has failed in that it has come to regard thinking as a simple intellectual process. Materialistic thought is as hopeless a code for life as commercialism itself. The power to think true is the savior of humanity. The mythological and historical redeemers of every age were all personifications of that power. He who has little more rationality than his neighbor is a little better than his neighbor. He who functions on a higher plane of rationality than the rest of the world is termed the greatest thinker. He who functions on a lower plane is regarded as a barbarian. Thus, comparative rational development is the true gauge of the individual's evolutionary status. Briefly stated, the true purpose of ancient philosophy was to discover a method whereby development of the rational nature could be accelerated instead of awaiting the slower processes of nature. This supreme source of power, this attainment of knowledge, this unfolding of the God within, is concealed under the epigrammatic statement of the philosophic life. This was the key to the great work, the mystery of the philosopher's stone, for it meant that the alchemical transmutation had been accomplished. Thus, ancient philosophy was primarily the living of a life, secondarily, an intellectual method. He alone can become a philosopher in the highest sense who lives the philosophic life. What man lives he comes to know. Consequently, a great philosopher is one whose threefold life, physical, mental, and spiritual, is wholly devoted to and completely permeated by his rationality. Man's physical, emotional, and mental natures provide environments of reciprocal benefit or detriment to each other. Since the physical nature is the immediate environment of the mental, Only that mind is capable of rational thinking, which is enthroned in a harmonious and highly refined material constitution. Hence, right action, right feeling, and right thinking are prerequisites of right knowing. And the attainment of philosophic power is possible only to such as have harmonized their thinking with their living. The wise have therefore declared that none can attain the highest in the science of knowing until first he has attained the highest in the science of living. Philosophic power is the natural outgrowth of the philosophic life. Just as an intense physical existence emphasizes the importance of physical things, or just as the monastic metaphysical asceticism establishes the desirability of the aesthetic state, so complete philosophic absorption ushers the consciousness of the thinker into the most elevated and noble of all spheres, the pure philosophic or rational world. In a civilization primarily concerned with the accomplishment of the extremes of temporal activity, the philosopher represents an equilibrating intellect capable of estimating and guiding the cultural growth. The establishment of the philosophic rhythm in the nature of an individual ordinarily requires from 15 to 20 years. During that entire period, the disciples of old were constantly subjected to the most severe discipline. Every activity of life was gradually disengaged from other interests and focalized upon the reasoning part. In the ancient world, there was another and most vital factor which entered into the production of rational intellects, and which is entirely beyond the comprehension of modern thinkers, namely, initiation into the philosophic mysteries. A man who had demonstrated his peculiar mental and spiritual fitness was accepted into the body of the learned, and to him was revealed that priceless heritage of arcane lore preserved from generation to generation. This heritage of philosophic truth is the matchless treasure of all ages. And each disciple admitted into these brotherhoods of the wise made, in turn, his individual contribution to this store of classified knowledge. The one hope of the world is philosophy, for all the sorrows of modern life result from the lack of a proper philosophic code. Those who sense even in part the dignity of life cannot but realize the shallowness apparent in the activities of this age. Well has it been said that no individual can succeed until he has developed his philosophy of life. Neither can a race or nation attain true greatness until it has formulated an adequate philosophy and has dedicated its existence to a policy consistent with that philosophy. During the World War, when so-called civilization hurled one half of itself against the other in a frenzy of hate, men ruthlessly destroyed something more precious even than human life. They obliterated those records of human thought by which life can be intelligently directionalized. Truly did Mohammed declare that the ink of philosophers to be more precious than the blood of martyrs. Priceless documents, invaluable records of achievement, knowledge founded on ages of patient observation and experimentation by the elect of the earth, all were destroyed with scarcely a qualm of regret. What was knowledge, what was truth, beauty, love, idealism, philosophy, or religion when compared to man's desire to control an infinitesimal spot in the fields of cosmos for an infinitesimally minute fragment of time? Merely to satisfy some whim or urge of ambition, man would uproot the universe, though well he knows that in a few short years he must depart, leaving all that he has seized to posterity as an old cause for fresh contention.